Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. President Trump officially announced his plan to run for president in 2024 on Tuesday night. After years of facing blows from the left, from the party establishment, and from the media, President Trump remains strong, and he is still willing to give up his comfortable life in order to fight for America and for the American people. That's why his voters have remained so loyal to him. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is calling for an investigation into how Harris County handles its elections. The war between Ukraine and Russia has escalated with a missile that hit Polish territory. It's a good thing that the missile was fired from Ukraine, so NATO has decided to let it go. Okay, let's get into it. On Tuesday night, President Trump spoke at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida about his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election. President Trump said, "In order to make America great again and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States." In his 63-minute speech, President Trump said that he is running again and that this is not his campaign alone, but our campaign. He also said that the only force strong enough to defeat the massive corruption we are up against is you, the American people. Together, we will be taking on the most corrupt forces and entrenched interests imaginable. Our country is in a horrible state. We're in great trouble. America's comeback starts right now. President Trump has outlined a vision for getting the country back on its feet, including strengthening foreign policy, lowering taxes, and cutting regulation. He said, "We will do whatever it takes to bring back honesty, confidence, and trust in our elections." He received an eruption of applause when he said, "To eliminate cheating, I will immediately demand voter ID, same-day voting, and only paper ballots. We will dismantle the deep state and restore government by the people. To further drain the swamp, I will push for a constitutional amendment to propose term limits on members of Congress. It's time." But President Trump has not announced who the candidate for vice president will be. Despite the Republican Party's lower than expected performance in the midterm elections, President Trump remains the strongest force in the GOP. This is thanks to the loyalty of his base. For years, President Trump has held a substantial lead over other Republican contenders in any hypothetical head-to-head matchups. Even when not in the White House, President Trump has been able to draw thousands of people to his rallies. He also remains the most prolific fundraiser in the Republican Party, having raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, called on Monday for an investigation into the way the elections are run in Harris County. Abbott said in a statement, "I'm calling on the Secretary of State, the Attorney General's office, and the Texas Rangers to launch an investigation into allegations of improprieties in the way the 2022 elections were conducted in Harris County." He cited problems and delays, including missing keys, insufficient paper ballots in Republican precincts, and what he said were staffing issues that frustrated and confused voters. This is a continuation of the forensic audit of the 2020 election. Isabel Longoria, the former election administrator in Harris County, was forced to resign after the March primary because 10,000 ballots were found to not have been counted, and other election irregularities and problems were discovered, including not counting all ballots within the time frame required by law. For this election, inspectors from the Texas Secretary of State and the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit were sent to Harris County to observe and monitor the voting process. The Harris County Republican Party announced on Monday that it filed a lawsuit against local election officials. They believe that the county officials had systemic problems with the election process. Harris County Republican Party Chairman Cindy Siegel said in a news release, "What we've seen over the past year, instead of it being just a few incidents of breakdowns in how the process has been run, we've seen what's turned out to be a systemic cancer in how Harris County actually runs its elections." The Texas Secretary of State's office will audit the results of the November 2022 midterm elections in Harris County, along with 3 other Texas counties. In the recently concluded U.S. midterm elections, polls show that Democrats won strong support from young voters. As reported by The Hill on November 13th, Exit polls showed that 72% of women aged 18 to 29 voted for Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives race. In the critical Pennsylvania Senate race, 77% of young women voted for Democrat John Fetterman, whose speech was impaired by a stroke. However, according to an exit poll conducted by Edison Research, women and young people did not contribute much to the Democratic Party last Tuesday if young women are excluded from the equation. In the House race, 53% of women of all ages voted Democrat overall, and Democrats won 54% of the young vote. Gallup poll shows that over the past 20 years, young women have tended toward the liberal left, while young men have remained relatively central. However, a competing poll, which is called the AP VoteCast, shows that the gender gap between voters is not significant in the midterm elections. 58% of young women said that they voted Democrat, compared to 47% of young men saying that they voted Democrat. 49% of women overall voted Democratic, compared to 43% of men overall voting Democratic. Exit polls show that those under 30 strongly supported the Democratic Party. This is driven by women. Meanwhile, those in their 40s support the Republican Party. Black Americans voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats. Hispanic and Asians also voted for Democrats, while white men and women support the Republican Party. Married women tend to be Republican and unmarried women tend to be Democratic. But as a group, women bring only a small advantage to the Democratic Party. Nationwide, Republican House candidates received more votes from white women, older women, married women, Southern women, rural women, and middle and upper income women whose earnings are between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. However, there are exceptions to the above findings. While Hispanic women support Democrats nationally, they also helped Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis get reelected. In contrast, in Texas, Hispanic women endorsed Democratic gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke. But white women ended up helping Republican Governor Greg Abbott get reelected. The left-leaning liberalization of young women in the United States is a powerful gubernatorial trend that is keeping them away from young men. According to an analysis of Gallup data by the Survey Center on American Life, 44% of young women will describe themselves as left-leaning liberals in 2021, compared to 25% of young men describing themselves as left-leaning. This is the largest gender gap record in 24 years of polling. Among young voters of both sexes who were polled in the Edison exit poll, 80% favored legal abortion and 49% cite abortion as the issue that determined how they will vote. 62% of women under the age of 45 cite abortion as their top issue. Young people are the only age group that will support Democrats more strongly in 2022 than in 2020. In contrast, among those aged 45 to 64, support for Democratic House candidates has declined from 48% in 2020 to 44% this year. In this midterm elections, the Republicans did well in the two bluest districts, California and New York. Of course, New York is still a Democratic state, apparently. It still has a Democratic governor, apparently, and state legislature. But with twice as many registered Democratic voters as Republican voters, the heavily donated incumbent Hochul only managed to win by a 5% margin over her Republican opponent. This cannot fail to alarm Democrats. Most importantly, the only seats flipped in New York State were Democratic seats, while no Republican seats were flipped by Democrats. Its loss naturally triggered a round of finger-pointing within the party. Although the mail-in ballots have not yet been counted, the Republican candidate Lester Chang is expected to be elected in the 49th Congressional District in Brooklyn. Lester Chang is not a veteran politician and does not have the backing of a major organization. The Chinese community is encouraged by his ability to defeat the 35-year veteran Democrat Peter Abbott. Chinese people were previously generally not very motivated to vote. Election consultant Derek Ho said, It was significant that the Chinese found out that voting can really change politics, which will encourage more Chinese to run for office next year. He expects that in next year's city council election, public opinion is likely to continue to shift to the right. He said that the general election in New York on November 8th was very enthusiastic compared to this year's primary election. Nearly 5.72 million people voted for the governor's race across New York State in this November's midterm election, not including mail-in ballots. This is more than quadruple the 1.31 million who turned out to vote in this year's primaries. Now that the results of the general election are in, we finally see that people have made up their minds in New York that they are ready to vote Republican. Since March, the Bank of Canada has raised interest rates 6 times. Interest rates have spiked from 0.25% to 3.75%. And the central bank has warned that the rate hikes aren't over. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem said this week, "We do think we still need to raise rates further, and we'll see how far we raise them." The central bank raised interest rates in order to control the highest level of inflation in decades, but raising rates is expected to slow the economy. Tiff Macklem said, "We actually think growth will be close to zero in the next couple of quarters until about the middle of next year. But this slowdown in economic activity should be short-lived," he said. He also said the unemployment rate will rise. The latest inflation data will be released November 16th, but Claire Fan, an economist at the RBC Bank of Canada, said that this latest batch of numbers won't do much to slow rate hikes. A pickup in natural gas and fuel oil prices is driving growth. She said that this should give the Bank of Canada enough reason to keep pushing rates higher. While there are signs that inflation in Canada is past its peak, it may take a sustained period of higher interest rates and a weaker economy to bring price growth fully back down to the central bank's target rate. A study conducted by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives points out that if the central bank were to raise interest rates rapidly in the hopes of bringing inflation down from 7.7% to 2%, this would cause significant collateral damage. This could include 1.3 million people losing their jobs. The study that was authored by senior economist David MacDonald found that the Bank of Canada would have zero success in raising interest rates quickly without causing a recession. MacDonald's study found that on 3 occasions in modern Canadian history, the central bank reduced inflation by 5.7% or more by raising interest rates. Canada did this once in the mid-1970s, once in the mid-1980s, and finally in the early 1990s. In each of these periods, high interest rates sent the economy into a painful recession that led to worker unemployment. On Tuesday, the Committee of the Council of Ministers on National Security and Defense was urgently convened in Poland. The reason is because a missile fell in a district in Poland which is located near the border with Ukraine. The missile hit grain dryers and caused the death of 2 people. Polish President Andrzej Duda made an emergency address to the country. He noted that the missile that fell into Polish territory was, after all, Russian-made. The Polish leader also said that the incident was isolated and that there was no signs that it would happen again. NATO met urgently to discuss the matter. Security General Jens Stoltenberg held a press conference in Brussels in order to explain that the preliminary investigation showed that it's likely that the missile was fired from the UPDF air defense system. He said that there is no indication that it was a result of a deliberate attack and no indication that Russia is preparing to take military action of an aggressive nature against NATO. But he stressed that it was not the fault of Ukraine. Regardless of who shot the missile, the fault was Russia's anyway. In connection with the incident in Poland, the leaders of the leading states who gathered at the G20 summit held an emergency meeting. In the final communique of the meeting, the G7 and NATO leaders condemned Russia's actions and demanded Russia's complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine. On the evening of November 15th, the Russian military launched the most massive attack on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine since the beginning of the war. As a result of the shelling, about 30 objects were damaged, including critical infrastructure. In total, as reported by the Air Force of Ukraine, more than 90 missiles were fired, of which 73 of them were shot down by the Ukrainian military. White House officials said on Monday, November 14th, that the Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns is meeting with his Russian counterpart in Turkey to remind Russia of the consequences of using nuclear weapons. Sergei Narishkin, the head of the Russian Federal Foreign Intelligence Service, attended the meeting. Burns was not discussing settlement of the war in Ukraine. Rather, he was sending a message about the consequences that Russia would face if Russia used nuclear weapons. Burns, who is now CIA director, served as U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2005 to 2008. In 2021, Burns met with Russian leader Vladimir Putin to try and convey Washington's concerns about Russia's approach since Russian troops were amassing on the Ukrainian border. In addition to the Russo-Ukrainian war, Russia and the United States have many outstanding issues to discuss. The issues include the extension of a key nuclear arms reduction treaty, a Black Sea grain export treatment deal, a potential new round of U.S.-Russian prisoner exchanges, and the Syrian civil war. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you all for your support of Front Page. Every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. So please don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. We've heard from many of our viewers that they don't get notifications of our videos anymore from YouTube. So please follow us on Telegram, Gab, and Getter for the latest updates. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, again, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.